Hey, what's going on everyone? This is Nick. Today I'm going to be talking to you about how to get to any key by using diminished chords. Diminished chords are a really great tool that can be used for songwriters, composers, and it's a really great way to seamlessly blend into different keys without being super abrupt and kind of unnoticeable. It's a subtle way of introducing some chromaticism without being extraordinarily out or extraordinarily complex. I also have this little chart for you on different ways you can resolve diminished chords. And if you're a songwriter, this is especially useful because it's a way to get to any key really easily and seamlessly. So if you're interested in getting this, check out the link in the description. You can download a PDF of this. And if you're interested in finding out more about it, stick around till the end. I'm going to explain it towards the end of the video. And while you're down there in the description, check out my link for Terranaut Recordings. It's a new website I have for a new service with my buddy Sean, where we basically are an all-in-one music production duo package. So check that out. So first, let's start off, what exactly is a diminished chord? Well, diminished chord in the major scale is naturally found in the 7th scale degree. If we look at it intervallically, we have a root, a minor third, and a flat fifth. Now, if we look at it sequentially with intervals, we have a minor third, and then from here we have a minor third. So the diminished triad I was playing was B, D, and F. So between B and D, there's a minor third, and between D and F, there's a minor third. But also between B and F, there's a flat fifth. If you studied the modes of melodic minor, harmonic major, they're also found in a few other places. I have a few videos on that in my mode guide playlist, so if that's something you're interested in, go check it out. But the thing we're going to look at today for now is fully diminished 7th chord. So while that's a diminished triad, a fully diminished 7th chord is a diminished triad with a double flat 7th. Now it's a little bit different than, for example, a half diminished chord, which is a diminished triad with a flat 7. So this is the sound of half diminished. This is the sound of fully diminished. Functionally, they work a little bit differently. When we have a half diminished chord, usually it's a minor 2 chord when it's in a minor 2-5-1. So in that case, it's acting as what they call a subdominant chord. It's a chord that prepares a dominant chord. If we go straight from half diminished chord to a minor chord, it'll sound like this. Which doesn't sound too bad because here in the B half diminished chord, we have a F natural going to the E natural of A minor 7. But when we add in the dominant chord, we now have this G sharp going to A rather than A staying on A. Now, fully diminished 7th chord functionally works as a dominant chord. If we were to play B fully diminished 7th to C major, so in this voicing of the fully diminished 7th chord, I'm playing B, then F, A flat, and D. So whenever we resolve something like B diminished to C major, it's called leading tone diminished. It's essentially leading up by half step to the next chord. Now the leading tone is the strongest interval that we know. I explained a little bit about this in my video. Every single piece of music is really just a B to a C, so I'm not going to get too into it, but it's a central part of music making. So we have a few different spots of resolution. The B is going up to C, the F is going down to E, A flat down to G, and then the D we can resolve two ways, depending on how you voice it. You can go up to E, or the D can go down to C. If you were to resolve down to C and have C in the highest voice, that's what's called a perfect authentic cadence in classical harmony. A good example of leading tone diminished is the jazz standard It Could Happen to You, where we go from E flat major to E diminished, then F minor to G flat diminished, to G minor, or E flat over G, and then A flat major. So the diminished chords are leading up by half step. Another way you can resolve it is what's called common tone diminished, where essentially we're going to go 1 diminished to 1. If you've heard that song Corcovado, that song has a common tone diminished in it. It's very common in bossa nova music. The common tone diminished is a cool one because we have C major and then we have C diminished. So in C diminished we have C, G flat, and E flat. The G flat is going to resolve up to G, and then the E flat is going to resolve up to E. Since I told you there's two places where we can find the diminished chord, you can either do a common tone diminished where you're going from a 1 diminished chord to a 1 major chord, or you can do a leading tone diminished where you start from the 7th degree and resolve up a half step. This diminished approach is also kind of related to the secondary dominant approach, where we're essentially inserting a 5 chord to have some sort of nice resolution. Now here's the kicker. There's only really 3 diminished chords. Now if you studied anything of music theory, you might be wondering, but wait, there's 12 notes in music, so how can we only have 3 fully diminished chords? Well, I'll show you. So if we take, for example, this B diminished we've been working with, we have B, F natural, A flat, and D. Now the fully diminished chord has a double flat 7, and another way to look at it is like this. If we take our fully diminished triad comprised of only minor thirds, and we add one more minor third, so we have B, D, F, and then A flat. A flat is actually a double flat 7th away from B, and a double flat 7th is actually just a major 6th. If you're a little shaky in your intervals, you might want to check out my video on how to get chords from a major scale. I talk about interval recognition and all that stuff and a few different tips to help you out. So you might want to check that video out. So since this chord is just built off of minor thirds, if we were to invert it, the chords would stay the same. So for example, if I were to invert B diminished, the bottom note of the next inversion would be D. Now let's spell out B diminished starting on D. So we have D, F, A flat, and B. But also, if you look at the intervallic structure between that, D, F, that's a minor third, F to A flat is a minor third, and then A flat to B is a minor third. It's still just minor thirds. So basically, B diminished and D diminished are exactly the same notes. The same thing goes for F diminished, and the same thing goes for A flat diminished. So within every diminished chord, you have 4 diminished chords. So now that we know that every fully diminished chord inverts into itself, and there's only 3 diminished chords, let's pare that back down to the triad and keep that same train of thought. Whenever I'm exploring some ideas, I like to stretch the imagination as far as possible. Now from here on out, most of the voicing I'm going to use are going to be open triads. And if you don't know what open triads are, you might want to check out my video on open triads where I go through all of them and the different combinations of them you can play. So let's take this B diminished triad. So for example, in C major, let's start off with just a C major triad. So now the next chord I'm going to play is B diminished. Now, since we can go anywhere within a minor thirds reach, we can either play B, D, F, or A flat. Any of those 4. So now I'm going to choose one arbitrarily. I'm going to go from C major to D diminished. And now I'm going to use the leading tone diminished approach to resolve it up to E flat major. So we have this progression. You see, it's a subtle way of getting to E flat major rather than just being like super obvious and abrupt about it. We can even take out the B diminished chord and get there like that. It sounds pretty natural. And now I'm going to stretch it a little bit. I'm going to go from C major to F diminished to F major using the common tone diminished, which actually works out nicely because the 4 chord in major is normally a major chord, and F is the 4 of C major. Now let's take it one more. I'm going to go to A flat, and I'm going to use a common tone diminished to resolve up a half step. That one's a really interesting one because A natural is the relative minor. And now so we're using the parallel major of the relative minor. Kind of a handful, but it has a really cool sound to it. So another really cool thing we can do is we can take both of these diminished chords. We can take the leading tone diminished and the common tone diminished and resolve them incorrectly. So what do I mean by that? Essentially, we can start off a common tone diminished progression like C major to C diminished. And instead of resolving it back to C major like you typically would, C major, C diminished to D flat major. And with that, you can invert it and you can get a lot more diminished possibilities as well. It's a way to get to E major. You can also take the leading tone diminished and resolve it as if it was a common tone diminished. So we have C major, then we have B diminished, and then we have B major. So using all 4 of these approaches, you can get a half step above or below. You can invert it a minor third and get a half step above or below that. Essentially, you'll have all 12 notes. So in this PDF in the description, there's a few different charts. The first one, symmetrical diminished chord, I color coded, is all of the diminished chords and their inversions. So for example, the C category is in yellow, the D flat is in green, and then the D natural is in blue. And that's a quick guide to check your diminished inversions so you can recall them quickly. The next one is connecting keys, and that's essentially every single way you can resolve the diminished chords. So the first line, I have the leading tone diminished resolving the leading tone way. The next one, I have a leading tone diminished resolving in a common tone diminished way. The next one, I have common tone diminished resolving in a common tone way. And then I have common tone diminished resolving in a leading tone way. So this chart essentially has every single possibility with that. I put 3 groups. We have the C major group, the B major group, and the D flat major group. Using the chart above, you can actually just substitute C major for example, E flat major or G flat major or A major. They work in all of them, so you can get to any key. Then on the next page, I have 2 other charts to kind of simplify things. We have the half step connecting keys, which essentially is all of the half step resolutions. Then we have the common tone connecting keys. Then finally, on the last page, we have some kind of bonus content, which is resolving them to minor. So you can resolve diminished chords to major, or you can resolve them to minor, which is really interesting. So I'm going to take C major and go to E flat diminished. Now I'm going to think of this as a leading tone diminished, and we're going to resolve into E minor. Let's hear how that sounds. That also works just as well. We can also resolve to minor in a common tone diminished way, and it sounds kind of interesting. It's kind of like an unsettling result. So the only difference between a diminished chord and a minor chord is a diminished chord has a flat 5, and a minor chord has a perfect 5th. And so if you include the resolutions to minor, you have so many different tonal possibilities, and you can really go anywhere. So with the two types of diminished chords, starting on the root or starting on the 7th, all of their inversions, and the two ways of resolving the diminished chords, you have a total of 16 possibilities for every key. And it's a way to connect any key to any other key. So that's about all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching if you made it all the way through. I really hope this helps you out. If you've enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. I'm making new videos every Monday and Thursday at 3 p.m. ranging from educational content like this, music theory, guitar covers, some basic production stuff, and stuff like that. So thank you so much if you've made it all the way through, and I hope to see you next time.